It matters at times of public interest and national interest. Whenever a disaster occurs, whenever an emergency occurs, it is the telecom networks that choke up first, right? You're not able to place a call, you're not able to get your message through. Invariably, this is the bottle, right? So, in such a crisis moment, do you want to make the crisis worse, where everyone is trying to download videos and also watch like stuff? Or do you want a separate channel where reliably you can get the information of public and national importance without in any way imperiling the telecom network? That is, that is where the strategic reason why D2M is so important, and which is why the government is looking at it seriously.
Imagine being able to access the internet on a feature phone without any data plan. Sounds too good to be true? Well, with direct to mobile technology, there might just be possible. To learn more about this technology and the policy progress around it and the technical evolution of it, we have with us a very special guest today, Shashi Shekhar Vempati, a technocrat with deep expertise and wide ranging influence. Shashi Shekhar serves in leadership roles, advising global media organizations, emerging startups, public institutions, and the government of India. He is the co founder of the Deep Tech for Bharat Foundation, which runs the AI for India Forum, a platform committed to building a sovereign, inclusive AI ecosystem for the country. He also chairs key national bodies, including the Apex Advisory Committee for Science and Technology Communication and the UGC Experts Committee on Educational Media. Internationally, he advises the Advanced Television Systems Committee (ATSC) and serves on the board of IIMC, AJK, MCRC, and BARC India.
And so, thank you so much for joining us today. It's always a pleasure to speak to you. I'm especially excited about this conversation, though, because we get to dive into direct to mobile, a technology I'm personally very excited to know more about. But before we get into that, I think it'd be lovely for all of us, including myself, to learn a bit about your journey. Everything from your time in technology to your time in government to now being an advocate for democratizing certain technologies for the greater good. Tell us all about it. Sure, great, great to join you in this conversation, and very happy to be here. So let me rewind back and try to set the context for my journey, and then that'll lead into your conversation topic today. I started my career interestingly in Delhi with Engineers India when I had passed out of IIT Bombay. This was 95, 96. This was around the time when the internet kind of just made its debut in India, and at that time there was no public internet, and I recall whatever little internet access was there in 1995-96 was through what was called the Educational Research Network, ERNet, okay, which was only accessible to the IITs, IISc, and a few R&D labs. Interestingly, when I joined, I was put into the EIL's R&D center where the environmental department was. And they had access to the internet because of being part of the R&D network. Was that your first exposure to the internet? No, no, no. I was already exposed at IIT Bombay. Okay. But what that gave me was the opportunity to actually set up, access to the internet for AIL at that point in time. And in the process, I started spending a whole lot of time on the internet. And then I realized that I was going to be a bad chemical engineer. And so the writing was the one that I had to become a software engineer. And that is why I made my career switch to join Infosys in Bangalore. There's a whole story on that, but we'll leave that for a different conversation. I don't want to digress from technology. So I spent almost 16 and a half years with Infosys and more than a decade of that in the US. And around 2012, I come back to India. And 2013, I was part of the team that ran the digital campaign for the 2014 elections here for Prime Minister Modi. And one of the outcomes of that digital effort was a platform for India 272, which was meant for digital volunteering, which once Prime Minister Modi became the Prime Minister, he basically, won the elections, it became MyGov. So all we did was say to basically transformed into MyGov, and that is the genesis of MyGov there. And so 2016, I was asked to join the board of Prasar Bharati as a part-time member. And in 2017, of course, I became the CEO. And so 2016, when I joined Prasar Bharati, it was a very eye-opening, a moment for me. Because all of us grew up with Doordarshan or India Radio. Both DD and AA played a very pivotal role in, you know, as a, in shaping and in our formative years, influencing our formative years in that sense. So to me, to come back, interestingly, I think when I joined EIL in 1995, EIL had three offices in Delhi. Bikaji Kama Place, where the headquarters, for the R&D sector in Gurgaon, where I was placed. And there was a third office in PTI building on Parliament Street, which is where the costs department used to sit. And in 2016, when I was appointed the board member, to my shock and surprise, the Prasar Bharati CEO and the board was sitting in PTI building. So I was back in the same PTI building for 22 plus odd years, very full circle, moving full circle. So it was kind of stunning and interesting moment for me. So it was a very illuminating experience sitting on the board and understanding where things were with the public broadcaster. And that kind of started this journey, which will lead us to this topic of today's conversation, which is direct to mobile. So when of course, when the discussion around this was happening even when I was the part-time member, but when I became the CEO, it became more serious. One of the issues that we were all grappling with uh, was this whole issue of analog terrestrial broadcast. I don't know how old you are, so I will not embarrass you. But when we were growing up, Doordarshan was still on the rooftop antenna system, and you would when we started, you would get TV broadcast for a few hours, one black and white channel. Then it became color. Then it became two black and white channels, or two color channels, and then of course the number of hours expanded and so on. So that rooftop antenna TV system of Doordarshan requires what are called TV towers or TV transmitters. And you would, if in Delhi, there's one tall tower in Pitampura. In most of the Indian cities, you would see this, huge tall tower and some prominent location in the city where the TV tower would be based, and that's where the TV transmission would happen. Is there only one in each city, or there are multiple? In one city, usually one high tower over the entire city. Of course, but that would just be limited to the surrounding area of that city. So in fact, when we were growing up, I recall very distinctly during the Indira Gandhi and then especially the Rajiv Gandhi period, that Doordarshan went through a massive expansion where they would set up these smaller TV towers, low power transmitters in practically every corner of India. So every day when you watch news on Doordarshan those days, it would be about the Prime Minister going to some remote part and inaugurating a TV transmitter. Right? And then there was, so by the time I became CEO, the scenario in Indian media had dramatically changed, right? In the 1990s, you had the advent of cable TV. By the 2000s, you had this explosion of satellite TV channels. Doordarshan, which enjoyed a monopoly for decades, was now facing competition for the first time, and it gradually lost its audiences. Still, Doordarshan maintained a certain monopoly because of cricket, that the Indian cricket matches would only be available on TV. That I think changed sometime around 2007 or 2008 when the BCCI, because earlier BCCI would pay Doordarshan to air the cricket match. Okay. Because there was a certain airtime value that Doordarshan would determine. So this the whole economics was reversed when BCCI said, "Why the hell are we paying TD? Let's just get the private channels to bid for this." So is that how the auction started? Rate of the rights. Okay, so the whole economics just flipped on its head, and that is where DD missed out because they thought in the monopoly era they could just demand and and get value for the buy. Right, the moment this started happening, cricket went out of Doordarshan, and that is when in I think 2007, 2008, the government had passed a law for what is called mandatory sharing of sports rights. Where because there was a huge uproar that you're not going to be able to watch cricket on TD Sports, so they said no, you have to share the signal with the public broadcaster for certain matches. That matter went into the Supreme Court, and finally, in fact, the final verdict on that came when I became the CEO. Okay, where they said yes, you have to share, but in a restricted way, where it will only be on DD Free Dish and the terrestrial network and so on, right? So the scenario was that DD was continuing to operate a large network of terrestrial TV transmitters, more than 1,000 of them, uh, uh, in a format which nobody was watching because all the audience had already moved on to satellite and cable, and of course now with OTT and live stream, right? Remote. So the challenge to the Prasar Bharati management and board was that what do we do with this technology which it has become obsolete and it has locked up valuable spectrum. Each of these transmitters guzzle power. The expenditure on power itself would run into a few hundred crores annually now. And then, of course, staff locked up doing nothing because practically there's no audience. So, yeah, you're just turning on this transmitter and turning it off every day. So we set up a committee to look at how should we phase out analog terrestrial TV. And the committee made some recommendations that in this manner we should phase it out. And that report was taken to the board. At the board level, we got it approved. Of course, there was huge pushback, as is natural every year, where be it the internal staff, be it external stakeholders who have vested interest. The biggest pushback was from members of parliament. I must have received like maybe a few thousand representations of different members of parliament protesting, why are you shutting off this analog TV transmitter in this place or in that place? In fact, the number of VIP references, parliamentary questions, it was just ridiculous. We had to face. But I was very lucky and thankful that ministers such as Prakash Javadekar ji and after that Anurag Thakur ji backed us up that this whole technology had to be phased out. And that support helped us weather all the pushback that has happened. Finally, the biggest push team during COVID, where the bulk of the transmitters were phased out. And at this point, I think on maybe 40 or so transmitters have been kept alive, mainly for strategic reasons in the border areas, okay, and in the islets of Andaman and that should be so on. So what this did is it did two things. One, it first it reduced the operating expenditure because you're not no longer spending on electricity for those transmitters. Second, it of course freed up the people, but more importantly, it freed up spectrum. So because a large number of these transmitters were operating in the what is called the ultra high frequency band, in the 500, 600 megahertz band, and that spectrum is valuable for a variety of things. For example, the 600 to 700 in that range, we had certain bands for terrestrial TV, which we freed up, which telecom, took back, and they then put it to auction also for 4G. I believe there were no takers. The auction didn't see any takers, but I believe now ESNL's 4G rollout is utilizing part of that. I see spectrum. So it was a national interest to do this. But the bulk of the spectrum, which is, I think it's somewhere at 470 to 580 range, or 520 to 5, for exact numbers, that is still valuable for broadcast. Now, internally at DD, they had an older roadmap of moving from analog to digital. The world over, terrestrial TV has gone that path, where they used to have this old DD style one channel and then it became digital. In fact, I remember when I was living in the United States, the transition from analog to digital and happened, and the government would give us a voucher to go get a digital set-top box for your terrestrial TV, and literally you would see 30 channels and so on. So this transition has happened world over. But it didn't make sense in India. Why? Two reasons. Why it didn't make sense for us to go from analog terrestrial to digital terrestrial. Because in India, as I said, we adopt technology in leapfrogs. Right? If you look at telephones, We went from landlines directly to mobile without seeing a whole lot of penetration of landlines, right? Similarly, in the case of television, we just jumped to cable and satellite. We just skipped the digital terrestrial step. So it made no sense to now bring in digital terrestrial for fixed televisions when people were already moving from satellite cable to set-top boxes with online streaming and so on. So to us, it felt like a transition that could not justify the public expenditure because you would spend hundreds of crores putting new transmitters into digital. But again, there would be no audience because the audience is already moved. So the question was, where is the audience now? And it was clear to me back then, and now it is validated by whatever we see, that the audience is going to be on mobile devices. Yes. And we're already seeing it with the volume of data consumption that's happening in a year, 30 GB, 40 GB a month. So to me, these long-term roadmaps for broadcasting, for the public broadcaster, was that it has to be on mobile device because that is where the audience is going to be. So the challenge was, can we come up with a technology where we can deliver broadcasting directly to mobile phones? So that was the challenge and it was the question. That time, interestingly, two things happened. Sankhya Labs, which was a startup out of Bangalore, they were developing a chip for a technology called ATSC3 in the United States, which is a competing television standard to what we had adopted in India, which was DVB-T2. Okay? So there was this debate over DVB-T2 versus ATSC3. Engineers can debate that to no end. But the interesting thing is that an Indian startup had built a chip in India for a global use case based on the latest technology. So that was one development that happened. And I recall in 2018, there was an event in Delhi, I think at Shangri-La or somewhere, where I was there. Amitabh Kant was there. Manoj Sinha was the telecom minister. And the Sankhya chip was launched. So it was India's first fabless chip design that was launched, where it had the ability to do multiple things. At that time, there was no use case in mind of the D2M for it. Not yet, not yet, but the chip was there. Okay, and the chip was capable of this new television standard and being able to receive signals. The other interesting development was at IIT Bombay, Professor Abhay Karandikar. He was researching on being able to use TV white space spectrum for providing rural broadband, where the idea is that if, uh, let's say, Delhi had a TV transmitter, Gurgaon had a different TV transmitter, and they were operating in certain TV bands. Within those gaps, there was quite a bit of frequency chunk, which could be utilized for rural Wi-Fi, rural internet, and he was researching that. So it kind of became obvious to me that there's a potential convergence here between these two approaches. So can we come up with a technology where the spectrum is the terrestrial TV broadcast spectrum, and the chip is capable. It's an Indian chip, and it is capable of being optimized for mobile phones. So that was the question. So at that time, Professor Abhay Karandikar, he had just moved from IIT Bombay to IIT Kanpur as director. So we said, can you come and talk to our board and tell us what this technology roadmap should be? So he came and presented to the Prasar Bharati board, saying that it is possible to come up with a technology roadmap where broadcast signals can come to mobile phones. And this was 2019, pre-COVID. So we thought it was interesting. And so we wanted, so rather than spend public money on digital terrestrial, DVB-T2 or what D3 or whatever was the next version, we said, why don't we leapfrog here and go directly of taking broadcast signals to mobile phones. So we asked IIT Kanpur, can you, do a proof of concept on this? So they were open to that, and so we had an MOU between Prasar Bharati and IIT Kanpur. Unfortunately, COVID stuck, so that kind of delayed the full organism. But however, IIT Kanpur continued that process. And they then put out a call for startups who can provide this kind of a technology. And Sankhya Labs then applied. They got selected. So a POC was first done in Bangalore to show that using the Sankhya architecture of low power transmitter and a chip on a mobile phone, uh, you could receive these broadcast signals on a mobile device. So, so that proof of concept, this was around I think 2021. It gave us a confidence that this is doable. So my term was going to end in June 2022, and a few weeks before that, we had a conclave in All India Radio in Delhi, where we had invited the chairman of TRAI, the secretaries of telecom and INB, and Professor Abhay Karandikar, who was director of IT Campo. He was also there. And we showcased the proof of concept, saying that this works. So they were quite was blown away that technology. Uh, and the interesting thing is it's an Indian chip. So of course my term ended by then, and I had to step out from being the CEO. But thankfully, because of this conclave, the leadership at the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting saw value in this, and they carried the ball forward. Especially, I would credit the secretary then, Mr. Apurva Chandra, because he then took interest in this, and he continued to engage with, I believe, IT Kanpur and Sankhya Labs. And they expanded the proof of concept to a pilot in Delhi, where the Pitampura television tower and 7 sites were enabled with these transmitters. Interesting thing is this: historically, the legacy architecture for broadcasting was one big tower, right? Yes, like we talked about in the big. For cellular phones, it was all these small cell sites. Yeah. For direct to mobile, what Sankhya came up with is a hybrid architecture where we combine the signal from both the high tower and the low powered low tower. Okay, and what that combination, that hybrid architecture gives you is a much bigger bandwidth and reliable, delivery of signals to the mobile phones. And so that was the first time in the world a hybrid architecture was attempted, and and that's what you see in Delhi, that very unique thing. And then that is what basically makes this technology feasible and possible. Of course, there are now several issues, several concerns, all kind of things, beyond that, which perhaps we'll chat about. But this is basically the genesis of D2M came about.
Wow. That's fascinating. And especially, I think one thing that I didn't really realize before was, the confluence of people that kind of converge to kind of, make this happen. You mentioned a few names there. Professor Karan Dekar is, of course, now Secretary, Department of Science and Technology. So it's crazy to see, how, everyone kind of played a role and how to slowly come to this point. But, speaking of which, recently at the Base Summit, there were a lot of demonstrations, and I think a lot of companies were also looking to, work on this technology.
Right.
So can I give us an idea of where things are today in terms of D2M technology, and both from a, technology and also from a, regulatory framework standpoint?
Right. So, what the proof of concept and the pilot did was they proved two things. Right. One, a chip can be embedded into existing mobile phones. It won't impair existing mobile functionalities. It can receive broadcast signals, and it can do so in a hybrid architecture between the high tower and the low power low towers to create a fairly reasonable pipe for receiving all kinds of services. Right? I think that's what the pilots. The interesting thing is because it is based on the standard for ATSC3, which is being used in the US, in Korea, and now I believe even Brazil has adopted ATS. What that allows you to do is the signals don't just have to be video or linear television. The signals can carry anything. It could be video, it could be audio, it could be data, it could be text, it could be a map, it can be a database, it can be an AI model, right? It can be. So what that means is that now you have an architecture for pushing out data, information, content, applications in a highly secure, reliable way using this hybrid architecture, which is very unique. What does that allow you to? Let's take a whole bunch of scenarios, especially in the Indian context. We had Article 370 repeat for a significant time in Jammu Kashmir. Internet was suspended. 4G, 5G services were not available. And during that period, the only way people could get information is through broadcast. Uh, Routinely, we see whenever there's a law and order issue, like for example, the incident that happened in Noor, the internet is suspended, so these services are suspended. How does the government get its message out? How do you get reliable information? Same holds true for what happened at the border areas in Sindhu. Right? There's so much of misinformation, so much of disinformation. So you need a reliable way to reach citizens when and where it matters, so that the information of public importance, national importance, can be delivered. We saw that during COVID as well, when there was a huge volume of misinformation. And whenever the PM spoke and gave his address, entire country tuned in. Yes. So that underscores the importance of being able to have a broadcast channel. Traditionally, how did you do it? You did it on these TV towers, but then people moved on to cable and satellite. Once people moved on to cable and satellite in the Indian context, how did you ensure public messaging was delivered? The government came up with lockout mandatory carriage, where they said that any cable operator or DTH operator has to mandatorily carry these 20, 30 to 30 channels by dictate. Okay, so to solve that for the satellite and cable era. What about the internet? Once your audience has moved to mobile, yes, they're consuming things on YouTube and WhatsApp. What is your way to get public messaging to? You are competing with the algorithms, you are competing with the volume and plethora of misinformation. There is no way for you to ensure that reliable public messaging of national importance can get to the citizens when and where it matters. So that is your challenge in the internet era. So what is the solution? So that is where the need for something like D2M comes up, right? Where independent of what is happening on the internet, independent of whether telecom networks are available or not available, whatever be the situation, messages of public and national importance can always be delivered to citizens directly without any dependency on any algorithm or any foreign platform. Look at what happened with Russia today during the Ukraine conflict. Overnight, YouTube just switched off RT, right? Now imagine if a scenario today, of course, we have great relation with US. I don't foresee such a challenge with big tech platform, but it is not inconceivable that some situation arises where it is, not an as strategic interest. And hence, the big tech platforms are forced or arm-twisted by some foreign government to turn off certain access to us. What do we do in that case? When it happened with China, what happened with, during the Russia-Ukraine conflict. So we cannot have a situation where delivery of public information of national importance is held hostage by an algorithm or by a public platform. So you have to have your own way of getting your citizens. So that is where D2M comes in. It is also important for another reason, and again, it's a very important strategic reason. While India has 300 television news channels, and as long as you will be able to available on satellite and cable, everything was fine. But today, increasingly, the consumption is moving to streaming, yes, to OTT, to connected TVs, and so on. Right now, all of our news channels are dependent for their digital revenues on one platform, YouTube. So the day, let's say, YouTube decides they want to turn off the tap, you're at their mercy, right? So it is also a strategic risk for India to have the entire digital news industry dependent on one or two platforms. So they again have to have an alternate mechanism by which they can directly reach citizens. And that again makes the case for why D2M. So those are the use cases that I see which make it so critical and uniquely Indian situations which demand that to real technology. And why not, right? It is an Indian design, indigenously made chip. Why should we always follow the West? Why should every technology that we adopt has to be invented somewhere in the West and only then we adopt it, right? We look at GSM, look at what has happened with 4G, 5G. In the case of 5G, in fact, it is atrocious. A large part of the 5G royalties, the beneficiary, are Chinese companies. Oh, yeah. Same thing. If you go to, let's say, people would, often argue with me that, why aren't we doing DVB-T? I said, have you looked at the royalties of all the packets or DVB-T? It is the European broadcasters. So you spend 4,000 crores of public money investing in DVB. Who is the beneficiary? It is BBC, Fraffer, and all Europeans. You want nothing out of it. So what is this biopic mindset with which we've gone about public spending on technologies which are invented in somewhere else? So why not? Why shouldn't we invent our technologies? Fascinating point. What is DVP? Just so that they all the same thing. Digital video broadcast. It's a European sector, so it's like GSM for mobile, right? This is for DVBs for interesting. And I wasn't aware about the fact that there could be royalties. No, we don't have to think. The way it works is when you buy a product, there's a chip inside it. Yes, right. The guy who sold that chip, he is paying royalties. So wow, you have to pay it indirectly. You have to add oxer for your paying. Their benefit. Interesting. Interesting. But yes, absolutely. I think this is a real case we wait for having our own, SaaS-based technology. I think it could also become a springboard for more such technologies to be developed within India. Right. This is where it kind of you know, the telecom. There are many people from the telecom industry. There's an organization, representing the telecom operators. There are all sorts of stakeholders. I respect them. I mean, India's telecom story is an amazing story, right? In terms of sheer scale, serving billion customers, lowest data loss, highest volume of consumption of mobile data. So it's an amazing story. I respect that. But why should you be so, have such a low self-esteem that you always want to see, this technology, if it is not invented by the European, it is not approved by 3GPP, you should not adopt it. Why that mindset? Why can't you take pride in what has been created in this net? That's a question that I would like to ask. Right. And it is unfortunate that we are always looking for validation from others. Why not invent it and say this is the standard? Like look at IPL. Yeah. I mean, to me, IPL is the best example of Atmanirbhar Bharat and India becoming a role model for the world. He said, we own a cricket market. We have the power of the market of 1 billion viewers. We will define the rules of the game. Let the world come here and play. And on our terms. Right. And I think you've done it. You proved it. You showed it to the world. I think so. I know we have the mid-end model, but no one's been successful since. Exactly. Right. So why can't we do it with D2M? It's very similar to UPI in that. Very similar. Absolutely. And I think this could also, be the beginning of something similar in the Bharati space. If you look at UPI and Aadhaar, right, especially UPI, it disrupted the payments thing. It has resulted in a societal scale mass adoption of a technology. It has brought down barriers, accelerated this whole push towards a cashless society. And it has done so in a very uniquely Indian way. But then the underlying technology is still, component that are sourced from different bugs to it. What we now eat is a full stack, right? Where down to the chip, it is technology that is being built, right? I think that is where we need to now think of a full stack, deep tech architecture, starting from the chip to the mobile device, to the platform, to the services, to the applications, the use cases. Entire thing is more uniquely. I think that's achievable, possible, and I think that is what this movement is really about. And that's what you probably saw at ways where you saw those demonstrations. Yeah. I think that one clip also went viral of Mr. Dwivedi showing it to, I think, last Abhay Khan. So a fascinating video. So, but just getting into practicalities of the technology as well. From a consumer, for someone who doesn't know, how D2M works at all, would you be able to shed any light on, what the potential user experience will look like for the technology? Like, how would you interface with it? I think, see, the user experience will evolve. There will be the most obvious use cases, which will be linear streaming. Like, for example, DD Free Dish today carries a large number of television channels. Some of them are also available on the OTT platform Waves. Why not? The same content would potentially be available on D2M. That's one possibility. The other possibility could be where a radio, for example. Today there's a big debate on digital radio. India is still grappling with, how should it transition to digital radio and so on. But if let's say you adopted D2M, then there's no need for a separate radio architecture. The same architecture can deliver your radio service and a large number of them. So it completely disrupts the radio landscape. So that's another possibility. There you don't have to, create another island of broadcast infrastructure and then separately have spectrum for it and manage it. So that's another use case. Third is, of course, your alerts and your disaster management and emergency alerting and messages of public importance and so on. But I think the bigger disruption and perhaps the opportunity is if we can help the telecom networks offload some of their load. Because if millions of people are watching the same IPL match, why do we need million streams?
Yeah.
Eating up the bandwidth and choking up the networks. It can be done infinitely with guarantee of experience, guarantee of quality of service with the broadcast channel. Right. So those are the kinds of things where I think the real value will come from. However, that will require the telecom operators to work within this architecture and collaborate at the end and find out where that value is. Because for something like 5G, the density of cell sites that have to be built is going to be a big, capex for that, capital expenditure for it. And it's not sustainable. And unless data prices go up, you can't recover. And in India, that is that's the pressure is, right? The moment you increase your data price a little bit, there's a huge pushback. So how do you do it? So that's one challenge. How do you ensure that where people are consuming such large amounts of live streaming, how do you ensure no buffering? How do you ensure quality of service, which you can't do on the internet? Right. So there is immense latent value for telecom. So to me, it is not a threat. To me, it is actually something that reduces their burden, eases their network condition, and allows them to provide value when quality of service, which today they cannot guarantee any. So there is a good opportunity there for the telecom.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. But what I had, while I was researching this episode, the articles I came across, a lot of them mentioned that telecos don't seem convinced at this point about the technology, and they would rather. Some of them even mentioned they would rather use that spectrum. They would rather have it auction and use that spectrum for 5G. They believe that there's no need to offload anything. So why do you feel there's this kind of almost like a pushback?
Yeah, sure. I think it's natural that when there's a new technology and it has a immense disruptive potential, there'll be all kinds of concerns. And I would attribute much of this also to lack of information. Perhaps an outreach has to happen. They have to be given demos. They probably need to be shown how the technology works, help them understand the potential, and I'm sure it make a difference. As far as the spectrum is concerned, globally the spectrum is earmarked for broadcasting. Okay, there is no telecom network infrastructure ecosystem for these frequencies. Nobody is building them. So even if let's say tomorrow and the government decides we want to use this for telecom, nobody is building equipment in that spectrum. So what will you do? And you're going to expect people to build it only for any? It's not going to happen, right? The auctions for 600 megahertz have failed 3 times. No takers. So are you telling me that for 600 megahertz they were not taken, but magically someone will appear for this one where there's no ecosystem? Makes no sense, right? But that aside, I mean that is not the main argument. The main argument is this: broadcasting is a public good. It matters at times of public interest and national interest. Whenever a disaster occurs, whenever an emergency occurs, it is the telecom networks that choke up first. Right? You are not able to place a call, you are not able to get your message through. Invariably, this is the bottle. Right? So in such a crisis moment, do you want to make the crisis worse, where everyone is trying to download videos and also watch like stuff? Or do you want a separate channel where reliably you can get the information of public and national importance? without in any way imperiling the telecom network. That is where the strategic reason why D2M is so important, and which is why the government is looking at its needs. Because these are two separate functions. One is a public function, second is a private function. Now, to make the private public function viable, just like what they did with DD Fedish, they could come up with a mod where public private, where it pays off for both. And I think that is the right way to do it, where the public private business model creates enough opportunity for the broadcasters, for the teleco operators to get their value without in any way imperiling the public purpose.
Fair. Now correct me if I'm wrong. While I was reading and trying to understand the technology, I think I came across a few articles which said, it'll be able to turn, feature phones into phones that can, access, the internet and things like that. So do you think there's a potential to kind of, because while in our country, the amount of people using data is quite large, it's not covered everyone in the nation yet. So do you think that this has a chance to, kind of bring people to the internet for the first time, perhaps haven't been able to because in their geography, towers aren't available or for whatever reason that they aren't able to.
Because there is a large population which is still on feature phones for a variety of reasons, maybe some because of economics, price points. But I think that to a larger number of them, it is the example that I gave of, this driver who of ADD who was interacting with us. And he says, मुझसे चलाया नहीं जाता. He cannot operate a complex phone. So you need a dumbed down simple phone, right? And to me, that is where the real opportunity of D2M is. If you can combine deep web with artificial intelligence, give an intelligent interface, simple interface, where for content he can consume it through the broadcast network, and for any interactivity, the intelligent AI locally is able to service most of his needs, and whatever little he goes over the internet to 4G or right, he gets it, right, and I think that is where perhaps the holy grail of where the mass potential for this technology is. It is if it can bring down barriers and empower a large section of society by combining the power of broadcasting to reach one to many and the power of edge-based AI, where it can talk to you in your natural language, interact with you, and get you the services that you need or the content which you.
Just pressing on that more, could you give me an example of like what a use case for this would be? Would it be something? I think I've read that potentially could have use cases for farmers, for example. So would you shed any more light on potential use cases?
Sure. And let's take an example of, let's say, the farmer who, has a certain issue in his with his crop and he wants expert information, right? He could, let's say he's from the Hindi, but he can interactively talk to his phone in Hindi and query whatever is the proper that he's using, right? And as a single as an intelligent AI assistant locally at the edge on his phone, which understands this query. And because we know that he's a farmer and he has agriculture related queries, let's assume this AI was optimized for that. So it's not a large language model, it's an optimal purpose built model which knows that queries on agriculture need to be handled in a certain way. It does that, and then he probably wants to learn more and he probably wants to see certain videos or certain content. Now, if this is a popular content, the AI can then direct him to the broadcast channel to receive that content and watch it and consume. So that's one potential use case, right? Similarly, there could be use cases where, let's say, a certain disasters occur, or let's say there were unseasonal rains in that particular region, and what needs to be done. The government would decide that this particular educational video of the components will push it out over the D2M channel to everyone in that area. So if he's a farmer or whoever, he knows what to do because of this content that's readily available to him on his local on the phone. Right. So that's another example.
I think that can be very useful. On the previous episode, I had a guest where we spoke about farming and agriculture. And there's a real discussion about how, there's a need to kind of bring technology into farming to kind of help farmers optimize their cultivation and their trade. So I think there could be big potential for a combination of D2M and AI in that space for sure. However, one thing that another criticism that I found online and something we spoke about was of India being a very price sensitive market. So a lot of people online have been writing that D2M technology will make phones more expensive with the chip or with the apparatus that you attach to it. So is that in some that you have?
Well, I think one question that I would like to ask them is the 5G phones. Has anyone asked why are they so expensive? The reason why the 5G phones are so expensive is because the chip that supports a very wide range of uh, frequencies and which are not even relevant to India, and yet we are paying that extra cost. So cost is really a function of scale, right? So the answer would be, if, let's say we had posed the same question for 5G, then as demand takes off, these prices will come down, the chips will become cheaper. Right? The same thing will hold true here. It's all a matter of economies of scale, right? And I think from whatever I've seen during waves, during the demonstrations, I think there is enough interest from manufacturers now to build this at scale and bring down those costs. If a Lava, if an HMD, if an Intel are interested, clearly they are seeing value. Yeah, being it. So to me, cost is not such a big thing. It's a matter of economies of scale, which can be easily achieved. You're a billion people market, right? And so these costs, they'll come down as we progress along. What is more important is the regulatory framework and the business model, where the public-private model comes together, so that the, the stakeholders see value of this and nobody feels it. And it's a win-win for everyone, be it the content creators, the broadcasters, the telecom operators, the device manufacturers, everyone sees well.
So are you seeing those conversations happening or with ecosystem kind of building around this?
I'm sure that there must be, because if the big manufacturers are shown interest, if someone like an Intel is shown it, I'm sure there must be these conversations happening. And the government is now perhaps going forward with their plans, how to make this happen. I'm sure if it definitely entail a viable model where public and private interests are served. And free dish is a good example. Of course, there are concerns around free dish. I think D2M is different from free dish in two respects, which I think some of these skeptics perhaps are not paid attention. What are the problems with free dish? Right? The first problem is that you had no idea which household had the free dish setup was, because there was no one single distribution point, right? Anybody could go buy a set-top box of the open market. There was no accounting for that. So that was your first problem. Second problem, because of its very nature, the way the TTH model was architected for free dish, all of the channels were free to air, unencrypted. And because of that, you have a very large install base of set-top boxes. And because you were not distributing set-top boxes, there was no way to enforce that encryption and authentication. Right? And hence, that is a concern if you're putting out premium part. Let's say you're putting out IPL matches. You don't want IPL matches to be broadcast unencrypted, where anybody can pirate it, anybody can monetize. So you have to protect the rights of the content owner who has bid thousands of crores and White House cricket. You need to respect that. And to ensure that their interests are protected, you obviously want such premium content to be encrypted and unpolarized. Now, since you could not do it on free dish, it's a legitimate concern there. But on D2M, these problems go away. Why? Because it is on your mobile phone. So I have stopped the ability to put software in it. I have the ability to control that software. And I can enforce any rules that I want. So if, let's say, you want to watch IPL over D2M, it can be your same JioStar app. You probably won't even know that you're getting the content on D2M versus you're getting it on 5G or 4G. But it's one seamless interface. It is your existing app, existing subscription, and it's a seamless experience. So that's possible because you're doing it on the phone. You have the ability to control this, right? Because you have the software in the phone. You can now measure it. So you know which phone has this capability, who is watching, how much are they watching, how long are they watching, all the data is available to you, which you couldn't get in Finnish. So you sort both the bottlenecks or both the gaps of Finnish on D2M because of the very nature of the technology. That premium content can be protected, the rights of the content owners can be protected. They need not, make their content available through any other interface. They can continue to offer it through their existing apps and their existing subscriptions. It's just that it becomes another mode of delivery for that, which is cheaper and better because you can guarantee the experience, no buffering, all of that, right? So, so that is the real value here. And I think once these guys see that value, I'm sure there is, it's a win-win for everyone.
I think that's a very interesting point that even I didn't realize earlier about the fact that it'd be so seamless. And I think there's perhaps a lack of awareness about that. And I hope this podcast helps in some way, to bridge that understanding gap that I feel there is between the industry and different players in the space. As we wrap this up, do you have any final message for anyone? Anything they should know about direct mobile technology? And any other message you want to, maybe put on to other people who are innovating other indigenous technologies?
Sure, I think it's a great example of an indigenous technology designed in India. Full stack, starting all the way from the silicon chip to the devices, to the platform, to the application and use case. So it's very unique thing, uniquely Indian. And it is in all our collective interest to make it successful. So I would say that don't just look at it narrowly from the myopic view of any one sector or any one constituency, but look at it as something that if we all come together and make it a win-win, then the nation benefits. Because for the first time, we would have told the world that it's not just your architecture and your platform that we are about to adopt. Here is something that we've built, or the world can adopt, and the world is very keenly looking. The US broadcasters are very keenly looking at what happens here. Brazil is very keenly looking at what's happening here. I had met with a delegation from Brazil, and they had hundreds of questions because they are extremely puzzled by how India will, make this happen. Because if India can make it happen, then it makes it viable for all of us to, get on the bandwagon because you have the scale of economies, right? So I think that is the real big picture here. So it's very easy to get caught up in any one segment's concerns with any one platform or any one policy. But to me, that is a very myopic way of looking at it. The big picture is this is India's opportunity to show the world that we can build deep tech, a full stack deep tech, and deliver value at scale. But the only way it's going to happen is if all the stakeholders come together and make this public-private partnership work. I think that is it.
That's a good message to kind of lead things on. Thank you so much for your time, sir. And thank you to our audience for tuning in. Stay tuned to Bharati's handles. Whenever there are any policy updates on direct mobile, we try to keep you updated on that. And we look forward to what's going to happen in this exciting space. So thank you so much. Look forward to you guys tuning in again.